Hey everyone, Ejecty here. As many of you know, I and several members of Kryptik Gaming were involved in the mode process with rhinos for Mythgard. We've been playing some of these expansion cards for a bit. I have reached out to every member in Kryptik Gaming that was in Q mode to grab their favorite deck, and I'm going to be going over those with you guys. This is Ejecty's Reckless Fourge. It is a Journey of Souls infused red-orange deck. Reckless Fourge is a combination of my deck Reckless Default from last season. You know, really, you're going to try and play out this deck very similar to how I have played Reckless Default. You can see some of those games on YouTube. The key is to get back, you know, your valuable minions from Journey of Souls while maintaining that same value in trading. The Fourge concept that comes with it obviously really goes off with Grand Finale. It's a card that plays out forged units from your deck on lanes 1, 4, and 7. So things like Mod Frame, Hand of Sod, Jezrai Arquebus, Caravan Brass, and Triton Patrol can all get played out with that. These are also very good cards on their own. The deck is fairly aggressive, but kind of sits into that same mid-range slot that Reckless Default does. I still am not sure if it's necessarily better than just a normal red-orange deck, but it's something I've really had fun playing. It runs a lot of the same cards, has a lot of the same strategies, but with a slightly different take in that it can also rely on Grand Finale and, you know, big Forge combos near the end. Plus, with something like Ruby Raider, you have 3 more face damage from Rush. So this is Reckless Fourge by Ejecty. The next deck we're going to look at is Poet Loops by erobert. So this is a very aggressive blue-green Necro. It reminds me very much of the red-green Necro that erobert has run in seasons past, where it's not necessarily so focused on getting out massive units, but getting out those big mid-range threats and applying a lot of pressure. One major thing to know is everything in this deck can fit inside Frecky's sidecar. Some of the new cards it uses are things like Auspicious Forecast and Diehard Drenny to pump those 4/4 spirits into your boneyard. Nameless Poet, obviously, as the name implies, he can bring back a spirit unit with warded with his ability. It runs Anelli, which is another form of green removal where it just sends a unit away. It's a very aggressive deck, and it's a lot of pressure. So that's the main point you want to do, is apply a lot of pressure. One of the great things about Nameless Poet is when it does die and bring something back using its ability, that card will still be the same cost it was before, even though it can be bigger and has warded. So it still fits in Frecky's sidecar. You know, like I said, it follows very similar lines to Red-Green Necro from seasons past, but is in a different color slot. It runs all the good blue mythic. I call them the big 4 blue mid-range mythics: Bragi, Kara, Magnus, and Tyr. And then just a lot of solid green beaters. It runs the Jotuns. So it's a very fun deck, very aggressive. It should do very well on ladder. The next deck we're looking at is by Tempest, and he called it Sneks. It had to be Snakes. So I'll say this from the get-go: this deck does not utilize that many new cards. As you can see, it's mostly a blue-yellow deck that has looked like blue-yellow decks we've seen in the past. What it does do is it runs 3 copy enchantments. Now, copy enchantment is a card that, you know, was not, I don't believe was spoiled, but it's very potent in that it can copy any enchantment and put a copy of it into your hand. Tempest's plan is to essentially play out these Serpent Dens, play out the Alarm Rings, and copy these enchantments for unlimited amounts of value. So you just have a snake coming back every single time. You know, it runs all the good blue board clears with Thunderclaps and Magnus. It runs the Misanthropias. It also runs Svin, who's a new card. He'll reduce the cost of enchantments, so that'll help to put down the Serpent Dens as well. It's essentially a blue-yellow deck. It runs Turn of Seasons. It's not rainbow focused, but it does want its entire focus to come down onto these snake dens and filling the entire board with them. It can run Root of the World for, root plays to cycle through your deck and get better units. Overall, it's just a very strong deck with, and I believe this is how a lot of decks might shape out in this expansion, where they are, this one I believe is 90% 4 cards, but it also runs copy enchantments, Svin, runs a few new cards to really bump up its abilities and, bring something new to the table. Alright, the next deck we're going to look at is by Riss, called PG Spirit Artifacts. So I want to start by saying, we have made a very big deal about purple-green spirits, and this deck is not solely purple-green spirits. It runs 18 spirits, 12 spells, and 10 artifacts. So the goal of this deck was to utilize both the new Media Autocam, artifacts in general, and then also combine it with spirits. This deck likes to run very heavily on the Media Autocam and the Gloombringer to continually boost your hand. The Gloombringer can draw a lot of cards here. It'll draw your Racers, it'll draw your Shinobis, it can draw Misfortune, it can draw Vixen. So these are the type of cards you're trying to draw out with it. It too runs Auspicious Forecast, to run some diehard Drennies to fill up your Boneyard with these same spirits. And then it also runs Necros, which can also be drawn by Gloombringer to, continue to create these threats on board, these spirit threats. It is a Fires of Creation deck. It's not a disc deck where you're constantly trying to bin stuff on purpose to bring back with Necros. You want to tempo out these Necros. It's a very interesting deck. It also runs Spirit Stones and Corrupt Prayer Wheel. 2 cards from the core set that didn't really have a lot of spirit synergy, and now they do. It's a very fun deck to play. You want to get out your Media Autocams and your Gloombringers and kind of just try and outvalue your opponent with these spirits constantly popping up on board. And then it runs a lot of the, it runs the big green finishers like Short Stag and Ikuturso. It also runs Murmur, and it runs a Perfect Grade as well. And then some of the artifacts, besides Gloombringer and Autocam, are things like Shroud of the Pit, which, as we know, is just more recursion. So it's a very fun deck. Runs some bells too to try and bump up the ramp. Misfortune is actually a very big factor in this deck, since you can find it with Gloombringer. It may not have a home on ladder as much as some that are more focused on just the purple-green spirits, but it brings a lot of interesting things to the table with spells, artifacts, and spirits all in one. This next deck is submitted to us by Circle 8, and it's a yellow-orange rainbow deck. So a few things to note. It does run a new card, Hammam Retreat. That card is very interesting in that it prevents your minions next to it when it's occupied from receiving the effects of Blight. So that is a big one here. You want to be able to get out tokens, surround them with Hammam's Retreat, and then use Misanthropias to wipe the board. It also runs the new card Guardian Plateaus, which are very interesting. They help to generate a lot more tokens. Every time you put a unit on it, it makes 2 tokens off to the side. A real big key with this card is when you play Armageddon Angel on top of Guardian Plateau, the Awaken happens first, and then the Creation. So an Armageddon Angel actually turns into an Angel and 2 2/2s. It runs Energetic Brosha to prevent, healing, to try and wear down their opponent, and then Ride Trickster and Mod Frames as well. So it's a matter of using the Rainbow Path to draw out these enchantments for free, playing out Serpent's Dens, playing out Hammam's Retreats, trying to get a lot of units on board using the Guardian Plateau as well, and kind of pushing through them after that. I don't know how much you'll see yellow-orange on ladder, but like I said, I think you will see all sorts of yellow-orange start to show up as more people get into it and see all the cool token tools, especially with things like Guardian Plateau, that there is to offer. Alright, this next deck is by Rune. It's called Fourge. You can see that he even spelt it a cute little way, Fourge, with the number 4, because it's 4 colors, much like Rune likes to play. Rune made this deck in the new path, Colosseum of Strife, and gave it the infused power as well. It has a number of new Forge cards. This deck may have the most new cards in it, and it's sitting at 33 new cards. almost all of them revolving around the Fourge mechanic. So you can see Blade Gorgers that ping off Fourge, Ruby Raiders, Gorgonelli. Much like the Red-Orange Forge deck, it wants to utilize Grand Finale and some of these other Orange Forge things to really push out these big Forge units. It has things like Canine Handler and Shroud of the Pit, which can, as you know, Canine Handler can draw itself, and then Shroud of the Pit can recall some of these great Forge units. Forge Smith can give you a lot of value from the hammers every time you play a Forge unit. And then it also has some big high-end like Armageddon Angel and Kushiel, along with Risen from the Deep. Something else to know is both Risen from the Deep and Gorgonelli have demises where they deal damage straight to the face. So they have a lot of reach in it too. Not only are these units big and beefy, but then they can really push damage within, indirectly to close out games. So it's a very interesting Forge deck. I think it's very high rolly, more so maybe than Red-Orange Forge, but it has a lot of really cool Forge things going with it. So if you're really looking for a deck to say, I want to play Forge mechanics, this is the one that is completely built around the Forge mechanic. It's a very cool deck. It utilizes the new path very well. It runs a lot of minions that really love it. So yeah, give Forge a try. Alright, the final 1v1 deck we're looking at is by Tritos, and it is called Podium of Pride. So by now, you may have discovered the Victorious Podium and the Omen cards that give you the rings. So, with that being said, this deck is a 6-color Victorious Podium deck. It wants to use all 6 colors, eventually getting all 6 rings, and to summon the champion of the contest. I will say very upfront, this deck is a meme deck, but I expect to see a lot of people trying to build these type of Omens Podium decks. So this is maybe a good place where you can start. It's Fires of Creation, it runs Foresight, it skews very heavily into yellow using their creation, or not creation. It skews very heavily into yellow using their control tools, and then splashes most other colors. Like you said, the goal is to eventually play out all the Omen cards. So Adorner of Fertility, Terror of Kur, Hall of Matrimony, Anolis Fabricator, Unforgivable Crossing, and finally Gamma Senin, and get all their rings. Once you have all the rings, then you can use Victorious Podium to get your hero of the contest. Now, once again, this is a meme deck, but like I said, everyone is going to see these things, and this is something that I think everyone is going to want to try to play, going to want to try to build. So this is a good starting spot. Tritos tried a lot of different combinations, and he felt like this is the closest he got to really pulling it off in a good way. Now, it's still going to be very hard. There's a good chance if you do win games, it won't be because of the Victorious Podium. It might be just because of other things that you managed to do throughout the game. But, really give it a try, because watching the champion of the contest come out is quite the treat. Alright, so next, I'm going to show you 2 decks that were submitted to me by Merlin. As you know, Merlin and erobert are KG's 2v2 experts. So Merlin wanted to submit to me 2 decks that he essentially helped to put together to really, show these cool new decks and what combos they can do. So the first deck is called Morbid Fatigue. It runs a lot of cool new tools and Morbid Centrifuge. It runs Geomara, who I think is a very good card. It runs Contagianoma. It runs the Doubling Dice. So it's a Fires of Creation Reconstruct deck. It combos with the other deck that I'll be showing you in a bit. You're going to eventually try and fatigue out your opponents using a lot of yellow's stalling and control tools. Same with orange. You have things like Armageddon Angel and Herald of Pestilence. With all these artifacts, you can constantly use divination to dig for your answers and threats. The other deck in this 2v2 is the called Rack and Ruin. So this one runs yellow-red. The other one was yellow-orange. This one runs things like the Stretcher. It also runs 2 Morbid Centrifuges. It runs Garland Arbors. These 2 decks together really stall out the game. They let you draw a lot of cards with Dragon's Teeth. It runs things like Gigantomachia and 2 Misanthropias as well. There's a lot of control and a lot of just really cool stall tactics. when the decks combine with each other, you're constantly throwing these Morbid centrifuges, which create the virulent strains at each other. So your opponents are drawing these constantly. They're taking damage from Stretcher. They're trying to play out things, and they're kind of getting fatigued and milled. So it's a very interesting combination. When they're together, it creates a level of inevitability that is really hard to escape for these 2v2 environments. And what's nice about them is you always have some board clear or something to help the other side, so you're never feeling like you're over pushed. So very cool strategy. Watch out for these two on the 2v2 matches. They are going to come up with a lot of cool stuff, but this is just a slight preview of two of the decks that Merlin Arrow are running to really show off. There will be a link in the description that's going to have a link to the article that will have each player's deck, so it will be easily exportable. You can just copy paste it into the client, and it'll have a slight description by each player, so they'll kind of tell you what they liked about the deck, what they might not like, how it runs, and kind of just let you know what to expect going into it. Thanks for watching. Give these decks a try. I think you'll have a lot of fun with a lot of these decks, and I think you can have a lot of success with a lot of these decks on the ladder as well. KG is very excited for this new season, very excited for Rings of Immortality. We look forward to putting out a lot of content for you guys with all these new cards. Keep an eye out for more new content coming both in the form of articles and new videos.